welcome everyone to our October Film Club. We'll just give everyone a chance to come on in. So tonight we have a wonderful film to share with you. This is, for those of you who are here for the first time, this is the Permaculture Education Institute's monthly film club. And so each month we share with you a film that is really inspiring to the work that we do at the Permaculture Education Institute and offers a sort of a deeper insight into becoming a permaculture educator, a permaculture designer, and frames up our ecological understanding in a way that gives us so much more to work with. And tonight we have a wonderful film called Animate Earth, Science, Intuition and GAIA, written and presented by this wonderful gentleman we have in front of us here, my dear friend, Dr. Stephan Harding. Now, Dr. Stephan Harding is the Deep Ecology Fellow from Schumacher College and was actually one of the founders of Schumacher College holistic science program and one of the founding members of the college as well. And I had the most fantastic opportunity as a young 20-something-year-old to go and live at Schumacher College in its very early days. And Stephan was there as one of the faculty and who was so deeply inspiring with the work that he was sharing around Gaia theory, around deep ecology, with his musical instruments, singing up the whole story and taking us for walks out to wood and opening up a different perspective and a deep reverence and a deep love for nature and helping us to see and understand science in a different way. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you here to our film club, Stephan. Thank you so much for being here. Well, before I actually introduce, I always like to also acknowledge the country on which I'm seated. So I'm here on the Indigenous lands, the unceded lands of the Gubbi, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm here on the banks of the Mookaboolra River, otherwise known as the Mary River, and neighbouring to the east is Jinnaburra country. And so, Stephan, you're seated over in Devon. Can you tell us a little bit about where you're calling in from first before we dive into GAIA, holistic science and deep ecology?
Sure. Well, Morag, it's lovely to see you and to work with you again. As you said, you were here for quite a while and you were one of our star students really at Schumacher College. Yeah, well, I wish I could tell you about the indigenous people here where I am in southwest England in Devon. The trouble is the Romans wiped them all out pretty much. They were the Druids, and they didn't write anything down. So we don't know, all we know about them is what the Romans wrote down about them, and the Romans hated their guts, literally. But we do know that they were very animistic and that they loved the forest and that oak trees were holy to them. And so were the wren, so was the wren, a little bird about this big, the wren. I think you have them in Australia, don't you? The wren family goes all the way to Australia. So where I'm sitting now is on a little patch of land, 3.5 acres, very near Schumacher College, which is our own land. And I was just telling Morag, we have a patch of ancient woodland and a brook that runs through it, and that's called the Wren Brook. And in Old Celtic, the word for the wren bird was a little brown druid. So when I go down, I try to go there every day. I sit there in this old woodland, ancient woodland, and when I hear a wren, I hear the call of the ancient druids, and the whole woodland lights up and becomes alive for me when I hear the wren. So I bring you the blessings of the Wren Brook, a little tiny patch of ancient woodland left in this devastated island, British island, really devastated ecologically, but at least we have a little patch of ancient woodland here.
And it sounds absolutely beautiful. You were telling me about the diversity that's there, which is not the image that we have much of the British Isles, is it? That, it's cleared, it's sheep, it's monocultures and not very wild at all. And that's not where you feel most comfortable, I know, is it? Where do you feel most at home, Stephan? Where do you feel like deeply embedded in your place?
I'll tell you a place I love, probably one of the top places is Western Australia. I've spent quite a bit of time there as a fellow at Murdoch University. I love southwestern Australia and up the Ningaloo Reef and up north. I got as far as the Pilbara on an expedition there. Oh God, beautiful. I love it so much. I miss it terribly. Your side of Australia, I quite like. I do like it. It reminds me of Costa Rica, where I used to live. And I was born in Venezuela in South America, so I have that sort of place in my veins, you know. But if you said to me, right, where could you live anywhere in the world? There's a nice house for you out in the bush and some work for you to do for GAIA. I would say, I think I'd like to live in southwestern Australia. Yeah, definitely.
Wow, that's so interesting. I was just thinking about the reef recently. I took my kids there to go swimming, and I was out with Evan, who you've met, my husband Evan, and we were swimming around and we came across these great big turtles. And so we just started swimming down along with them, and I'd dive down for as long as I could hold my breath and just float there in the water, and they'd just be looking up at you and like the beak, and then they were kind of cheeky because the reef was getting a bit shallow at that time, and we were just following. They took us right up, and then I remember like trying to pull my stomach in so I wasn't going to touch the reef, and the turtles that were taking us across the top of this little section. But it was just the most magical thing, you know. It is, yeah.
Yeah, on the Ningaloo, was it?
No, it was actually on the Great Barrier Reef.
The thing about the Ningaloo Reef, as you probably know, is that it's a fringing reef. So you swim a few strokes and you're over the reef. Fantastic. I love the Ningaloo Reef.
Yeah, this bit of reef was just off the beach. All of us just kind of walked out with our flippers and our snorkels and just started swimming around, and there it was, right there. Yeah, amazing.
I swim in the sea here, but it's freezing cold, so I have to wear a wetsuit. And there are hardly any fish left, you know. Really shocking. I mean, it's been overfished so much that there's hardly any fish. But when I do see a sort of wrasse about this big, it's lovely, you know. That's a lovely thing to remember. Anyway, I'm living off breadcrumbs, you know, here in England. It's living off breadcrumbs. Whereas where you are still in Australia, you're living off lovely home-brewed, home-baked bread with big slices of butter and jam, you know, in terms of nature. Whereas here it's breadcrumbs. But I mean, what can you do? You have to make the most of the breadcrumbs.
And, you know, take the time to find a way to do the rewilding. And I know that there's big moves in Britain to be doing that. And
that's right. Our land is rewild. We're letting it go wild, and we manage it for biodiversity. Yeah, that's right. There's the Knepp estate in Sussex or Surrey, which is pioneering. You've probably heard about Knepp.
No. What's that?
But it was a farm, quite big, several thousand acres, which wasn't making much money as a farm. So the owners, very enlightened people, Isabella Tree and her husband, they just let it go wild, but they manage it very carefully. You know, they've got wild boar and they've got all kinds of cattle and ponies. They have to harvest them, of course. And the biodiversity has just exploded. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Julia and I want to go there on a little safari. You know, you can hire a little tent and spend some time the next summer. I think we'll do that.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I think that what you talk about in the film that we're about to watch, you know, in a little while is about this awe and reverence of nature. And I wonder, like, where that came, like, where did you first feel that? Was that something that you always had, or was there like an epiphany, a realization, or was it a gradual process of just unfolding and going deeper and meeting different people, you know, through your experiences at Schumacher College too? How did it happen for you?
I think all of that. I think I'm an ecologist or lover of nature in my bones. You know, when I was, as I said, I was born in Venezuela in Caracas. When I was small, my dad said to me, well, my dad told me when I was small, maybe 2-3 years old, he noticed I'd spend a huge amount of time looking at tropical flowers. And he thought that was very unusual for a small kid. And he thought, oh, he's going to be a biologist of some sort, which is what happened. You know, I've always had this deep love of nature. When we got to London when I was 6 years old, that was a bit of a shock. I remember going into the garden and turning over bricks and just spending time with little tiny woodlice, you know. And then I joined various nature-loving societies. I created one myself in London, the Hampstead Zoological Society, with some friends. You know, we looked after frogs. We tried to save frogs on the Hampstead Heath. Then I went to Africa before university to work in the bush on elephant and warthog as a field assistant. That was a shot in the arm. Amazing. So I've always had this love. And then when I came to Schumacher College, the first person to teach a course here was James Lovelock, you know, the author of the GAIA theory. Did you meet him, Morag? No, you didn't meet him.
I didn't. I came to the next course, which was with Fritjof Capra.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, so he and I became great friends, and I worked the science with him and spent a lot of time with him, and then with Arne Naess and Fritjof Capra and Helena Norberg Hodge, who lives not far from me, and all these other amazing people who've come to Schumacher College. And sort of my whole focus shifted from more scientific focus, if you like, more into animistic psychological focus, which I'd always had, of course, because I was always dissatisfied with science, as you'll see in the film. But here at Schumacher College, I encountered also deep ecology from Arne Naess. And so I've been able to cultivate a sort of union between the rational mind and the heart, or the intuition, or feeling, sense, intuiting, and feeling, thinking. That's what I've been doing with my work here the last 30 years or so.
Yeah, I did. I met. I was there for the courses when Arne was there, and it was fantastic. And I wonder whether you could just share with those who are here a little bit about Arne and deep ecology, and just let people know a bit about where it's from, and maybe a story about Arne, because you know, people like Arne, they're no longer with us, and James as well is no longer with us, and you've had this huge opportunity to kind of be deep in relationship and conversation with these people. I wonder if you have any memories or stories to share.
Of course, lots of memories of Arne, yeah. Well, when he was born, he's Norwegian, it's the first thing to say. So when he was very small, about 6 or 7 years old, his mother took him to their cabin in the woods. You know, Norway, I've been there many times to visit Arne. It's the most wonderful country. I mean, I still prefer Western Australia, but Norway might be number 3 on the list. Anyway, you know, vast expanses of woodland, wood and lakes and mountains everywhere. Yeah, incredibly wild country. I love it. So when Arne was taken to his family's cabin in the mountains or in the woods, there's this big mountain in the distance, a big flat top mountain called Hallingskarvet. And when Arne saw that, he was only about 6 or 7, he just couldn't, he was speechless, you know. And his mother said, "What's the matter? Why have you stopped speaking?" And Arne said, when I'm grown up, I'm going to build a cabin on the mountain. I love the mountain. He just fell in love with the mountain at a very early age. And sure enough, that's what he did. You know, his mother said, "You're crazy, you can't do that. It's Arctic up there. The winds will blow the roof off your shed and everything." But he did it. He became professor of philosophy at the age of 27 at the University of Oslo. An incredibly bright man, intellectual. So he built a cabin up there, and he spent 11 years of his life on and off there. And that's where he was really happy, you know. I remember when he was an old man, I visited him in his old people's home with Oscar, our son. He was about 6 at the time, and Julia. And I would just whisper in his ear. The name of his cabin was Tvigerstein, which means the place of crossed stones. And I would whisper, "Arne, Tvigerstein." And he'd sort of close his eyes and go into a reverie. Oh, Tvigerstein. It was a very real spiritual home for him. And it is an amazing place, you know. I mean, it's high up on the mountain. The views are incredible, of lakes and forests, endless lakes and forests for hundreds and hundreds of miles. You hardly see any human interference. There's a tiny sort of electricity line. You can hardly see it in the distance. That's it. No roads, nothing else. No housing estates, nothing like that. It's a wonderful place to study and to think and to be, you know. And even in the summer, there's patches of snow. And Arne was a great mountaineer, so he would climb up the side of the mountain, and even made a cabin at the top of the mountain, jutting over the precipice. And the only door was in the floor of the hut, so you had to climb up and then open the door. Of course, I was terrified of the heights. Do that. I climbed onto the top of a big boulder once near the cabin, and I was so terrified I couldn't get down. He was laughing and laughing at me. You know? He was very playful. I mean, that time I was mentioning when we were in the old people's home, he was chasing Oscar around on. Arne had a Zimmer frame. He was chasing him around the old people's home, and little Oscar was running around screaming in delight, you know. The other time we went to visit Arne, when he was a bit younger, maybe 80 or so, we saw him learning skateboarding in the park with all these young kids, you know. Unbelievable. He was full of joy, full of energy. And one last story. When he was very old, my friend Per Ingvar Hawkland, who worked with him a lot, went to visit him in the same old people's home, and he was very close to dying. And Arne was moving his arms like this, you know. And Per Ingvar said, "What are you doing, Arne? What are you doing?" And Arne said, "I've got this ball of white light, and I'm just exploring how it feels, this ball of white light," which fits very well with what the Tibetans say about the bardo. You know, when you die, the first thing you see is the white light. So it's very interesting.
And so that's also a place where you've spent some time, and where you and Julia and I traveled together up to Ladakh, up into the Himalayas. I wonder what spending time in a place like Ladakh in Little Tibet, how that influenced or informed your world of deep ecology and thinking.
Yeah, I remember that. That was quite a journey, wasn't it, Morag?
It was up the side of the mountains, and with behind AK-47 wielding people. I don't think I'd ever seen a gun until that point, and I think I was quite terrified, actually.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, I felt so deeply at home in Ladakh. I think the time we went with you was our second time there. The first time we went, as soon as I stepped off the aeroplane, I felt immediately at home. I mean, I love Tibetan Buddhism, really great. The time we went with you, I remember we went on this bus trip from Srinagar, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it was it was lovely, but I was a bit depressed. But as soon as we got onto the plateau of the Indus, is it the Indus? I can't remember. You know, the river and the big mountain, sort of it's desert, but beautiful blue sky, big mountains, Himalayan in the distance, ones with snow. My spirit just lifted, you know, that sort of heaviness just left me. I was in that lovely state for 3 months, or however long we were there.
Yeah, and you know, I think I sobbed and sobbed when I left. I don't think I really wanted to leave. There's something, I came alive there. And even now, like I can still feel the warmth of those bricks as you walk past as the season's getting colder. You know, like I used to walk close so I could feel the warmth in the evening, and the sound of the river rippling down through those little glacial meltwater channels, and the songs coming down, you know, each of the fields and the you know, all the different songs. I can even remember them. They're in my head still now. And that was what, 30 years ago.
I remember. Do you remember the song Heli Kyong La Mule, Heli Kyong La Mule, which they sing as they harvest? We helped a bit with harvesting.
Yeah.
Because we lived up in the countryside in an old Tibetan Ladakhi house, handmade, you know, beautiful. Aren't those houses, huge houses, very old houses, beautiful Tibetan shape that sort of go like this, all exquisite. You lived in a family like that, didn't you?
Yeah, I lived on the roof.
You lived on the roof.
The little sunroof, solder drying sunroof spot.
Yeah, we lived a similar sort of situation, just lovely. And I remember the monasteries. There's one of the monasteries has a beautiful, huge statue of Mahakala, which is one of the Tibetan feminine, I think, or maybe not, divinities. The stock Gompa. God, I carry that with me so strong. I spent hours just sitting there with this huge, in this very dark little temple with this massive statue. Did you go there, Morag? Stop.
Yeah.
Just absorb it. She's black, you know, matte black, or he, but I think it's a he, matte black with sort of skull necklaces, skulls, and all sorts of things in his or her hand. And then I remember this little old monk would come along and light the candles in front and fill the little water vessels. And I felt, even just thinking about it now makes me feel so happy. I love that place. Yeah.
And I think what was the real epiphany for me too was just that realization that everything came from the earth and was returned to the earth. There was no money, but there was this great sense of wealth and joy and richness and song and aliveness. And when I returned back home, I felt this deep emptiness. Like I knew how to be smart and intelligent and go and work and buy stuff, but I didn't know how to make stuff. There was this emptiness in the consumer world that being in Ladakh opened my eyes, which is why I've I think I've thrown myself entirely into this world of permaculture as a way to see how we can sort of remember that way of living, to be able, like what you talk about in the film, to be able to slow down, to observe, to connect, to be deeply in this sort of this state of being in awe of nature, and to spend time observing and to finding that way that we can live this one planet way of life in deep reverence. So for me, that was the place where I think Schumacher College and Ladakh together, that experience was this opening of an awareness. And I think, that opportunity that you've created at Schumacher College for people to see another way forward is so incredibly important even now, like I think it's more so now. And I wonder, your film was made a couple of years ago now, but every single message in there is even more potent at this point in time. And how do you connect those thoughts about like slowing down, but also the pace of change, the pace of positive change that we need to have? Like, where do you sit with that at the moment, of the need to act, but also the need to slow?
I don't think we can act unless we've slowed down, unless we've connected. We need to have a very deep connection with Gaia, if you like, with the cosmos, or with nature, or with a little beetle, or with the bird, with bird song. We need to be able to really listen. Let's take bird song. In my case, the wren, which I mentioned earlier. I need to really, to be effective in the world, to be an effective teacher, which is what I do mostly, I need to really hear the wren when it sings. I need to really be able to drop everything and just really pay attention to what that birdsong is telling me, and then, of course, I'm filled with inspiration. It's very mysterious. You can't put your finger on what that inspiration is. Or let's say a red admiral butterfly, one of our British butterflies. I might see one on a bush one day. And instead of just walking past, I just stop. It makes me stop in my tracks. A red admiral butterfly. Then I spend as much time as I can with it, and this communication starts to happen between me and the butterfly. It's as if the butterfly is there deliberately. This could be my fantasy, but I think the world is like that.
Yeah.
And the butterfly has put itself there so that the butterfly and I can communicate. The butterfly says, look at me. Look at this beauty. Where has this beauty come from? Look. And I'm looking and I'm saying, gosh, you're so beautiful. Thank you for your inspiration. Thank you. And there's a communication built up, which fills you with goodness and with happiness and with energy, energy to do something pro-Gaia and pro-human in the world. Mm-hmm. And so you can get that just growing vegetables. Very important, isn't it, to grow your own food? Like I grow some vegetables here. Repairing things. For example, the other day I had to repair my thing on my guitar, one of the little keys for tuning. It's very tricky, but just doing that, with a sense of quiet and trust, it's very, very powerful. The repairing. Julia, my wife, is very good at repairing clothes. She'd look at these beautiful things she made. Look at that.
Oh, wow.
And she does that with such care. So these are all things, all this slowing down is very important. The faster the world goes, the outside world goes towards destruction, the more we have to slow down to counteract it. And I really think that every person who slows down in their own garden, in their own home in some way, really connects deeply with Gaia, with nature, with the depths of being. Even one single person doing that, slowing down, helps to counteract the madness of the mainstream world. Yeah. And nature, of course, is so helpful in nature is crying out for us to relate to her in that way. She wants our love. She wants our relation. She wants us to love her. The trees, the butterflies, the clouds, they're dying for us to love her. And they can't believe how we walk along blind and not realizing that they're calling out to us. That's the feeling I have very often. Of course, that rhymes very well with what the Aboriginal folks are saying in Australia and the Buddhists in Tibet and Ladakh. In fact, all the indigenous cultures know this. It's common human knowledge, which we've lost in our culture.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So just before we screen the film, Stephan, I wonder whether you could just mention a little bit about, because you talk about this in the film, about the earth being alive or as a living, because there's this, is it a living system? Are you describing it as, or is it alive? Like, how do you describe it in your words?
Well, from a scientific point of view, you're not allowed to say the Earth is alive. I mean, if I go to some of these sort of Earth system science conferences sometimes, and I'm a bit of an outlier because they know I'm an animist, and you're not allowed to, the Earth isn't alive. Come on, don't be ridiculous. And they come up with all these arguments for why the Earth isn't alive, which I disagree with entirely. So from a scientific point of view, from the mainstream science point, it's taboo to say the Earth is alive. But the Earth is a complex system, with lots of feedbacks between life, rocks, atmosphere, and water. And out of those feedbacks, you get the emergence of planetary scale self-regulation. But that's just a kind of luck, I mean, there's nothing inherent in that. So I like the science, but I don't like the soullessness of it. So I counteract that with my feelings. That's a thinking function from a Jungian point of view. So I go to my feeling. How do I feel when I'm in nature? And my feeling tells me, of course it's alive. Of course it's alive. And so does my sensing, my sensory, and also my intuition. So when I use all my 4 ways of knowing equally, sometimes it happens that I'm GAIA, as I put it. In other words, that I know with my thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition, not just with my thinking, but with the 4 ways of knowing. I just know that experience the Earth as alive. I call that being GAIA.
Right. Mm.
And I hope the film might help you all somehow to feel a little bit more GAIA. I'm sure everyone here who's on the call knows what I'm talking about. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here.
Mm.
It's a sort of very mysterious, magical experience, which is very hard to define. You could say it's a sacred experience. Not only is Gaia alive, but she's a sacred jewel. I would say Gaia is an alchemical vessel for brewing consciousness. Not just human consciousness, insect consciousness, plant consciousness, microbe consciousness, fungus consciousness, But our consciousness is very important for Gaia, I think, because we're the only species that can tell her story to herself. I mean, through science. That's the good thing about science. We can tell her, you're 4,600 million years old or so. She'll say, oh, really? Yes. And then, when you first started, there was no life, only a molten ball of rock. Oh, and she likes to hear this. She knows this, but we're making it conscious for her. I think that's one of our roles.
Yeah.
Why is Gaia spoken as she? Because she's the mother. I mean, it's archetypal. Gaia is definitely a mother. Because all our matter comes out of her, right? All of this stuff here, look, it's all come out of the Earth. It's all these carbon atoms. Actually, they all started out in a star, but they came out of the Earth, just like our mother puts us together when we're in her womb. Similarly, the Earth has put us together and given us these elements that make up our body. So she's archetypally feminine.
Mm. And so when you're teaching Gaia and holistic science and deep ecology, how do you, because you wouldn't just be teaching about it, how do you create those contexts and environments where
Julia,
can get,
yeah.
What was that, sorry?
Julia's that's why I was waiting.
Oh,
yeah.
Bye, Julia. How do you create that environment or that context or that learning space where people can have that deepened sense of what you're talking about? Because it's not an intellectual thing that you teach about. You're not just abouting about it all the time.
Well, I think, and probably at Crystal Waters, you do a similar thing. I think one has to create an environment, a whole learning environment that's consistent. So, for example, as you know, Morag, at Schumacher College, everyone does some cooking, everyone does some cleaning, and looking after the place. And we're in a small community. We get to know each other really well. And we're in a beautiful place with nature around us. I mean, that really is very important. So we have the container, which has to be right in that sense. And all the principles of that place have to be Gaia. Then what I do is, of course, we have sessions on Gaia, and I describe Gaia in the classroom, but we go out into Gaia. So I like to say we don't go outside, we go inside.
Yeah.
When we're in a class or in a building, then we're outside. When we step through the door and we go into Gaia's body, then we're inside. So I try to introduce that kind of Gestalt shift, so we start realizing that we're actually inside a living being, which is our own, which is the body of Gaia. My friend David Abram makes this point very beautifully. He says we have two bodies. One is this little body here, and then there's this wider body, which is Gaia, the earth, in which enfolds this little body. And all the ecosystems of Gaia are her organs, and therefore our organs, So I try to put together that kind of perspective with the science, but I try to bring the science over into a more soulful understanding of Gaia. So we don't reject the science, It's no good rejecting anything like that. You have to incorporate it into a wider perspective. That's what I've been trying to do in this film, and in my teaching and my writing. I try to do that.
Yeah. And are you close to publishing your next book, Stephan?
Published, yeah.
It's published. Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah,
oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to have to get my copy of that right now. I've been telling everyone about your other book, your first book. Have you got a copy of that there?
Animate Earth, yes.
And that's what this film is based on.
That's right. This one, the new one, it goes even further because it links alchemy, in Western alchemy, with the science of Gaia. It's trying to use alchemy to help us understand or incorporate the science into one's soulful relationship with nature. Because after all, alchemy is our Western mystery. No, I don't know what's call it, mystery tradition. It's our way. It's our Western traditional way of getting in touch with nature. That's what alchemy is. Both our own nature and the nature of nature, which are ultimately the same thing. So that's what I've tried to put the science. I've tried to drag the science of Gaia into the alchemy, to try and alchemize it and bring soul back into the science. That's what I'm trying to do with this new book.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to put the links for the books down in the recording so that people will get a chance to follow up and find those books. Yeah.
Thank you.
Was it nice to see it again, Stephan? You must have been a while since you've seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it for a long time. I didn't think it was quite as good as that, I must say. I had tears. I've got tears in my eyes. It's just an amazing film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I wish I hadn't wish I'd been a bit calmer. But anyway, it was all, it's beautiful, isn't it? Really beautiful.
It's really beautiful. And it's really lovely to see Brian as well underneath the gorgeous horse chestnut tree, neither of which are with us anymore as well.
The chestnut tree is still there.
The horse chestnut tree, is it? I thought it got disappeared.
No, they were trying to cut it down, but we stopped that.
Oh, good.
So it's still there.
Well, I would love to open up to see if there's any questions or comments from people. So maybe what we'll do, Stacey, if you're there, anyone who popped their hand up, if you could spotlight them so they could come on in. So hello, Kate.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Stephan. I'm really grateful to be able to meet you and share this space today. I think my question is the $6 million question, really. In terms of us being able to make the change that is needed to reverse the situation that we're in, do you feel that lies, that the actual solution is going to lie with governments? And if so, how do we make governments look at this from a holistic perspective? Because it's just so frustrating, isn't it, for everybody? And obviously what happened here late last week with the protest with the Van Gogh painting and young people just becoming so frustrated, and rightfully so. What's the answer?
Well, the answer is it's we're in a very difficult situation. We're in a very, very tight spot. It's getting worse and worse and worse and worse, as you know. So what can we do? Well, I think we only have our own life, don't we? So I think primarily each one of us needs to slow down, connect with Gaia and be Gaia'd, be open to being Gaia'd. And then we have to look at our lives and see, well, what can I do in my life, given my circumstances? That's all we can do. So some people can be very courageous activists, like Extinction Rebellion, who I admire immensely. Others can only do small things, like maybe planting some wildflowers in their garden. I think it's just based on everyone's individual life. Maybe lots of individual lives build up into a global change. I know it sounds pretty feeble to say that, but what else can we do? Some people, for example, like Tom Carnac and Nigel Topping and Paul Dickinson, who've been at Schumacher College, are doing big things like talking to businesses about seriously going green, Others are in politics. So some people can do big things, some people can do small. All of those people have been inspired by Gaia, have been Gaia'd one way or another. That's the key thing, to open yourself to be Gaia'd.
Yeah.
I wonder, Stephan, whether you want to just mention something about scale, because essentially, just whether you do something big or something small, there is this ripple effect that happens, or there is a shift in perception that can happen. Like something that might look big, but it's actually not as big as someone who's doing something which is touching so many people's hearts and changing in a way that cannot be quantified. And so this brings in that qualitative and quantitative approach that you're talking about. I wonder whether you could just talk about that scale of perception.
I think we should just do what we can without, whether it's big scale or small scale. As I was mentioning earlier, I feel maybe it's a mystical thing to say, but just one person suddenly finding beauty in a butterfly or finding beauty in the sunlight on some leaves and really appreciating that, really feeling connected with the whole cosmos just through that experience. I think that has a very big impact on the whole. I mean, that's not I can't prove that scientifically, but if the universe really is a great soul, a great psyche, which it is in my experience, then every single experience of awakening like that has an influence in some way. I think that's our responsibility, is to awaken. The human responsibility is to awaken our consciousness, so it melds with the consciousness of Gaia, with the consciousness of the cosmos. It is a mystical thing to say, and I'm not ashamed of it. I think we need more mysticism in our culture, more heart, more soul, more mystery. That's what's missing. We're also focused on numbers and counting, like I was saying in the film. To speak mystically, or for example, like I did in my new book about alchemy, it's considered really flaky and silly. Well, it's not. So that's it. Be Gaia'd. Go out in your garden or wherever, or even in a busy city street, and just feel the Gaia-ness of it, experience it, and then do what you can in a practical sense.
Thanks, Kate, for your question.
By the way, someone asked about the film. I think it's available on Vimeo for very little money, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll share all the links to it afterwards, Stephan, so people can find their way to it and share it out in their community as well. Because I think it's a great way to open up conversations and open up the possibilities to share this being Gaia'd idea, pro-Gaia. I think that's, the film gives that possibility for these types of conversations to happen, and that's the power of film. And Kate actually is in the midst of working with the film team at the moment, 6 Inches of Soil, which is a regenerative farming film based in the UK. Thanks, Kate. Tenzin, go ahead.
Thank you, Morag, and thank you so much, Stephan. I was very moved. We both were very moved by the film, and I was particularly touched. I also have a background in ecological science, in climate change impact on biodiversity, but as you might have guessed by my name, I'm actually now ordained in the Tibetan tradition. The forest very much took me to meditation as well. And I'm fascinated to hear how, I mean, I felt from the sharing before the film that you'd been touched by time in Ladakh, and would be interested to hear your thoughts on how your contact with those contemplative traditions informed your way of being. For example, when you sat with the milk thistle, for example, how you see those two kind of integrating now.
Yeah, well, I think meditation is the key, isn't it, really? A sort of meditative attitude, where gradually with meditation, your thinking mind or your discursive mind, you know, your rabbit mind, I can't remember what it's called in Buddhism, but that sort of monkey mind, isn't it? It sort of calms down after a while. You have to practice. In my case, I still have to practice it a lot. But there are these moments when it just kind of stops, or almost stops. And then the world can present itself to you as it really is for you. And the relationship opens up between you and the world. And you see deeply into the nature of the world. But it's all based on a relationship with the world. You know, it's I find I'm deeply involved in that. It's not as if I disappear, not at all. I become more present. A deeper part of me becomes present in the world through that process. And I find, for example, mantras are very helpful for that in my case. I particularly like the Medicine Buddha mantra, or the puja, Medicine Buddha puja. So getting myself, the meditation, particularly from Tibetan Buddhism that I like so much, helps me to enter into the living stream of nature. For me, the important realization is that it doesn't take me out of the picture at all. It brings a deeper me deeply into the picture. I mean, maybe I've misunderstood what the Buddha was saying, but I know it's supposed to be no self. But I don't experience it like that. I experience it as self. Only the self is the world, the universe. And my little ego is then part of that. I can't remove my ego. I shouldn't try to remove my ego. It has a role to play in the whole business. You know, my ego helps me to organize my day and get involved in pro-GAIA activities. So anyway, that's my sort of understanding. Sorry, it's a bit incoherent. But I'm deep to Tibetan Buddhism. I really, really love Tibetan Buddhism very much. It's been a tremendous help to me. And also meeting some of the lamas, particularly Trangpa Rinpoche, who I've met several times. You know, incredibly inspiring.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you, Stephan. I was hearing an echo of Arne Naess's invitation to discover ecological identity in your answer as well. So yeah, very beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the ecological self is Buddha nature, basically. Or the self in Jung, you know, with the capital S. These are different words for the same thing.
Thank you, Tenzin. Andrew, would you like to open up your mic now? Stacey will bring you in.
Thanks, Morag. Hi, Stephan. I was just in Schumacher about 4 weeks ago, and we were talking about opening up Schumacher in Australia. With my friend Clementine, we were talking about Monica Galliano.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. I can honestly say I have been guided. Thank you for an incredible experience in Schumacher. It was really incredibly enlightening. My question relates to our relationship in the Western world with time and language, and particularly in the context of the Greek word chronos, and a recent connection I've made with the word kairos, and that we don't have a word in English to describe what keros is, and just curious about how that has your relationship with time has affected your work and your writing.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Interesting question. One way I relate to time is through what we call the deep time walk, which we developed here. Sergio Marishin and I, one of our students in holistic science, he and I developed it. It's not an original idea, though. the basic idea is you take a certain distance in space, in our case, 4.6 kilometers, and we allow that to represent the history of the Earth as shown to us by the science. So our Schumacher College deep time walk is over 4.6 kilometers. And on that scale, every millimeter represents 1,000 years of Gaia's life. And we start in before Gaia began, and we go towards the future. It takes a long time to do it, several hours to do it. And on the way, we tell the story of what happened in the development of Gaia. Now, that's interesting because you could think of that as sort of linear time, right? Because you're walking a linear line through space. But on the other hand, if as you're walking it, you realize that it's time, both what you're seeing right now, you know, with all the trees and all the biodiversity and breathable oxygen, etc., wasn't there for much of the walk. So what I'm trying to say, I'm not saying it very well, is at the same time, you find yourself in the deep past and also in the present as you're walking. And the fact you're walking makes it very bodily and very meditative. So it's possible to get this sense of time in which all different times are here in the present moment. You know, the deep past of the Earth, when the Earth was just a molten ball of rock, say 4,500 million years ago. And then when the first life appeared, maybe 4,000 million years ago, first bacteria, maybe 3,500 million. All those things are present right now as we're walking, seeing all this glorious biodiversity and this glorious development of Gaia. So it's a sort of linear time, but it also becomes, how can I put it, a vertical time, because all the different times are present right now. And I think that's more connected with Kairos time, wouldn't you say, Andrew? Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
I've just set up a deep time walk on our little piece of land here, over 550 meters. Beautiful. In a big sort of figure of 8. And that's very powerful. What I started doing is walking backwards. So I start from the present moment and I go back into the past. That's incredibly powerful. And you see, as you do it, you can do this Goethe thing of visualization. You can imagine, for example, in the Carboniferous, you go through the Carboniferous, you can imagine gradually the forest disappearing as you're going back in time. You can imagine the dragonflies disappearing, and then, you know, the amphibians disappearing, and you end up in the Devonian, and you go back, and finally, eventually, there's no life at all on the land. It's all in the ocean, in the Cambrian, and you go back. That's a very interesting way of being with time, I find, on my own land. So you can do it over a shorter distance. 550 meters is a good distance, I've discovered. Yeah.
Yeah, we've managed to map it out in a similar way, Stephan, along the river. We take students for a walk along the river and go deeper and deeper into the sort of the source of the river and have all these markings, and it's the story. And I think this is a really important part of this way of starting to understand, is telling the story of the Earth and allowing the story to unfold, and the pace and the rhythm of the story, and how like you're saying, that embodied learning that happens as you journey along that path.
Time, that's nice, Morag. So time is a kind of story, isn't it?
Yeah.
By the way, if you want to do this yourself, you can do Google or deep time walk. Maybe you could put that on the resources, Morag. Deep time walk.
Of course. Yeah.
You can download an app that we created for your phone, which takes you through the deep time walk. You just start the app, put your phone in your pocket, have one earpiece, and it takes you through. And you can walk anywhere you want. It tells you the story. You share the story. The phone measures your footsteps. And there's also resources there you can use, and you can do training. We have trainings to help you lead deep time walks if you want to do that.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
I will include that, definitely. So we've got the deep time walk, the 2 books, and the film. I'll make sure that I link all those, as well as the recordings of this session as well, so you'll be able to access that. Because I know that there was a number of people who weren't able to join in on this session, so they'll be able to join in on that recording. Over to you, Nick. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Morag. Thanks, Stephan. What do you reckon Gaia thinks about weeds and feral animals?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, you mean animals that we've, or plant organisms we've transported from one place to another and are causing trouble, like camels in northern Australia, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what does Gaia think about? Well, it's interesting. I when I was in Australia, I asked an Aboriginal person about that, you know, and because in those days I thought we have to wipe all the rabbits out, wipe out the rabbits from Australia, we'll get rid of cane toads. And part of me still thinks that, you know, but the Aboriginal person said, oh, we have to accept them. They're part of the system, you know, they didn't use the word system. They're part of the bush now, so we have to accept them. And I thought that was very unusual and very interesting. It stopped me in my tracks, you know, because I was very anti, I still am very anti some of these species and that we've transported around the place that cause trouble. We have them in England as well, you know. Even rabbits here were brought by the Romans. So what do I think about it? I suppose I come to an intermediate position. If we can use science to get rid of some of the harmful exotics, you know, then, well, we should think about whether we should do it or not. For example, on some islands, rats have been wiped out using scientific methods, and that's been very good for the seabirds and therefore for the marine ecosystem. Is that okay? Yeah, I would say so. But other species that we can do nothing about, I think we just have to accept, you know, like the grey squirrel here in England, which is brought over from America. I mean, people have tried all sorts of ways of controlling them. It hasn't worked. Actually, the best way of controlling the grey squirrel is to introduce pine martens because they like to eat them. So anyway, that's a bit of a rambling answer, but I don't know what you think. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you that in some cases it is possible to remove a species that from a local area that could cause trouble, but a lot of the time a weed is doing a repairing role, and you can't stop it even if you want to.
Yeah, that's right. I don't like the word weed. I don't think any organism is a weed, you know. You could say it's a plant in the wrong places from our point of view, or even from the ecosystem's point of view, but one must always have respect for all life. Even cane toads in Australia, you know, cause so much havoc. It's still a toad, you know, still an animal. They can't help, the individual toads can't help being there. They didn't bring themselves there, we did, you know. So weed, I think, is a disrespectful word. I don't use it myself.
And I wonder too, Stephan and Nick, whether there's something to do with time in this context. And I'm taking my example in my mind to the garden, for example. If you create disturbance and there's a cleared area and there's been some sort of destruction, the first thing that comes in are those fast-spreading annuals. And there's one part of you that wants to look at it as a weed, and there's another part of you watching over time what happens, that's actually helping that soil to come back to life, to bring and nourish and activate the soil organisms and the soil life. And what happens then is, as you start to just stand back and watch that unfold, there's this complexity that starts to emerge. And so I wonder whether we put time into this picture and think of, instead of us, well, we've made a problem, now we've got to fix it. Like, how much of it is stepping back and being like a steward of more complexity coming through. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe it's beyond our concept of time, of how this healing can happen. That's not again with every single thing that's out of place, because I know that but you know, there would be some kind of cycle of ecological system that happens, a boom and a bust, and then something else will take over.
Yeah, and over thousands and thousands of years, those exotics will become a part of the ecosystem, as long as we haven't destroyed everything altogether and changed the climate so much, you know. And speaking of climate change, say here in England, we've got lots of exotic tree species, you know, and I tended not to like them very much, and I still don't like them. But I think, well, if the climate's going to change, so maybe we need a whole range of different exotic tree species and plant species here, so that some of them can thrive and keep the ecology going when the climate changes. You know, so it changes my view of exotics to some extent.
It's a very big question, Nick, and I think, you know, part of the response is actually being deeply connected to what's happening in each particular place and noticing where that impact and what the set of relationships. And I think that's kind of the systemic perspective, rather than focusing on the thing, looking at the relationships, and perhaps as a way of by adding more complexity, the balance can be restored, and the balance can begin to sort of start to, as Kestra was saying in here, that the toads are actually coming back into balance now because of, you know, the natural balances before. What we were saying there with the crows, that's right, who are learning to flip them over, and so shift and change in that way. So yeah, being in observation and seeing at the relationships as opposed to the pointing at the thing and the problem, which is where you end up in that sort of fighting, you know, the one part of it, and then you end up causing other problems because you're not looking at the whole, you know, that whole system.
Yeah, there's so many native animals that have come to depend on weeds for habitat and food. And so if I just ask nature what it thinks about these new plants, they seem to be saying, well, let, you know, go for it. It's better than what was there, which was just like, I don't know, grass or like big clearing.
Thanks for your question, Nick. It's a really, really big question in lots of ways. Look, I realize that we're way over what I said at the time allocation would be, and it's such a wonderful opportunity to spend time in conversation with Stephan. I don't want to turn off because I'm having such a good time being here chatting with you again. I wonder if there's any last questions that people would like to, anyone, maybe one more question if there's anyone who'd like to jump on in, and then we'll let you go on your day, Stephan. I haven't been keeping track of the chat, so if anyone's noticed the question in the chat, perhaps you could let me know. All right. Well, I think perhaps we'll close here now, Stephan. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. And thank you. Please share this, the link to the film when I send it out. Encourage people to get in and watch it with friends, and maybe watch it with a class, or watch it wherever they are, and open up conversations about this, about how to become guided. And yeah, well, I can't thank you enough, Stephan, for spending this time with us and for making such a beautiful film and for putting words to these ideas, these concepts. I will share also the books and the Deep Time Walk. So yes, you can purchase the film as well. I will send out links for you to how you can access that. Well,
thank you, everybody. Thank you, Morag. It's lovely to see you again, and lovely to share with you. I think you're doing great work, everyone. So thank you so much. Really lovely to be with you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephan. Thank you, everyone. Take care and stay safe. Good night, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Good morning to you, Stephan.
Bye.